Welcome to Season 1, Episode 43 of Digital Dissection, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties. Today, we have a conversation with actor Dileep Rao, star of Drag Me to Hell, Avatar, and Inception. We are excited to bring you this episode as we explore Dileep's incredible story. From Jeopardy to Hollywood, there's a lot to unpack here.
But before we think twice about having some in-flight champagne, we are Chelsea, Joe, and Mark, three friends doing our best not to be cursed by angry elderly women. If somehow you got here by accident after waking up from several dreams within dreams, why not try looking for us on all major podcast platforms by typing in Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our blog. If you like this show, leave us a review or tell us what you think by emailing digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. Your feedback helps us out a lot, and we always like hearing from our listeners. We want to understand more about your journey and how you got to where, maybe some projects you worked on, but we like to focus on just as much of like your origin story as we would some specific questions about, properties and stuff like that. So
I was bitten by a radioactive nerd. No, I'm kidding. I say origin story. It makes it sound like I'm a character, and I'm definitely not. My origin, I was the sperm that won. I guess, like the best answer to that is I was, a middle class, mostly Indian American kid. My parents are immigrants from India. I was born in Los Angeles. I kind of grew up all over the world. I had a lot of opportunities to diversify my thinking and be exposed to different cultures and Arab culture. I live in Saudi Arabia, American kind of Western white culture with some minorities in Colorado, then back to LA, which is a much more diverse, much larger field and much bigger cultural experience. So, and then I went to college in San Diego where I was studying to be a doctor. At least that's what I wanted to be. And my parents really wanted that. I wanted that. It seemed like what we all wanted. And then I, fell into the theater, and it was like you suddenly know what country you're from, right? You look at the passport and it's your pictures in there, and I knew it immediately, and I really wanted to do it. I was a little scared of my parents, and I told them, and I had good reason to be afraid because they were incredibly disappointed and horrified by a kid going to college suddenly deciding he's going to be an actor, right? And, there's different kinds of people who enter our profession from different places and different times. Like, there's some people who move to LA when they're 12 with their parents and do it. There's some people who move to LA when they're 16 without their parents and do it. There's all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. Some people do the, theater circuit for 25 years and then fall into filmmaking and kind of don't like it and go back. There's so many ways to do it. And so for me, the journey really was about learning skills, learning aptitudes. I kind of didn't really know what I was doing at that age. I was very young, but not, like I said, people start a lot younger than me. Yeah. I think I had some talent, but I definitely had more passion than knowledge. And so then I went to drama school. I went to the American Conservatory of Theater in San Francisco, headed at the time by Melissa Smith, who just recently stepped out and passed away from cancer. Beloved teacher of mine. I was in her first class. I learned a lot there. A lot of it was both learned consciously and unconsciously. Acting is a kind of a funny thing to learn. It's more akin to learning like dance or a sport sometimes, because it's a very body-centered thing. It's a physical enterprise, not an intellectual one. Although that can help you a lot, and it's useful to be cerebrally bright and all that. But I think it's principally a physical enterprise. You have to learn things in your body that are not memorized, like your lines or something. Even your lines shouldn't be memorized that way. Like there's lots of theories about all this shit, but like it became to me a really deep understanding of the physical process of the human being, how your body informs your mind, how deeply your feelings are your physical part of your psyche and your physical being itself, and how mind-body connection is really, it's a fundamental part of how your voice is produced, how how fast your brain works, how it works through your body, how you feel things, how the audience feels things, and then, later on through a lens. So I learned a lot of that there, and a lot of it was really tough for me to learn. It was much harder to learn than stuff that was, academically more collegiate, like when I was learning, the sciences and math and all those kinds of things. Those things are much easier, I think, for a cerebrally adroit young man like I was. This was a little bit more esoteric and a little bit more You had to like have a lot of faith in the process working on you while you had no concept that it was working. So anyway, I went there. I think every single artist, every single actor, you start working through your strengths and realize there's a lot more to go with your strengths. And then you start ameliorating your weaknesses, and those never get quite as strong as your strengths. But you try to get a balanced approach and a kind of balanced understanding and way of working so that your toolkit is full. And yeah, you may not be the greatest guy with a tiny little socket wrench, but you've always been good with a hammer and a saw, or like you don't know how to use it all, right? But you're a great paint person. Like you have to know what you do, and then you work on the stuff you don't do. And then sometimes the stuff you don't know very well, it produces great gifts and great breakthroughs and great satisfaction, even though you may not reach an aptitude where it's like, that's the best thing you do. But it's a lifelong process that I started working in the theater off and on. I started getting better jobs, worse jobs. And then you learn, acting is a job. Like I was saying, you are auditioning, you're getting jobs, someone by word of mouth, you're getting, you're into a director says, yeah, I'll put you in this play and do that. And so I then worked on stage for I think close to 8 years, not quite, but close to 8 years out of drama school, and didn't do anything in front of camera. And I really think, I wasn't comfortable in front of the camera. I didn't really feel welcome in, to be honest with you, like in filmed entertainment, because LA particularly, while very diverse, this is a time, it's not even that long ago, but you really couldn't audition for anything if you looked like me, unless there was a part specifically written for you to be a featured sort of character through the white eyes of the white creators. And so you really didn't have much of a chance of breaking through and creating a career, because there was no character for you to continue playing, right? Like if you on a very special episode of blah de blah, they encounter an Indian dude, and then you and every other Indian dude are up for that part. Like you may not have another job chance like that the entire year, So and the theater was less racist on its face, but still had its issues, right? Like if there was an Indian play or a play about immigrants, which is again, a window box from a very white point of view about what people are doing. You might get a chance to do that. And I was also very glad to get those opportunities, of course, but in your heart of hearts, it's not right. It's not fair. And it isn't treating people with talent with merit. It says that there's another merit, right? Which is whiteness and the centrality of the white experience, which really mattered in terms of how they created narratives, whether you wrote them, I'm a writer as well, whether you met on writing projects, whether you were meeting on acting projects, your actual acting talent was sort of not that important. What mattered was how much you look like the centrality of the narrative structure, not of the piece, but of the narrative structure of American viewership, right?
Yeah.
And
the
so
safest view that the minds behind the production want you to see, right? Quote unquote safest.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always said, there's a lot of racism in America. A lot of people are racist. We all are. We all have racism built into us by the culture. But there are some virulent racists in this world. One of the hardest bits of racism to get past is not practiced by virulent racists. It's practiced by people who are afraid of offending racists. And so there were a lot of gatekeepers early in my career, I would love to have dinner with, I have dinner with you. You're so great. I loved you on the play. I could never cast you on this TV show because what would middle America think if you were the lead, right? That's not possible. And I can't even see it, right? And to the credit of a lot of women of color who became executives, and some men, of course, but a lot of women of color who became executives in Hollywood, they started, calling it out and making sure that creators and participants were people of color, women, LGBTQ people. So there's a big diversification of everything. Now, don't get this wrong though. The most jobs that are available to everyone are still white men. They still work more than everybody, and this, look, it's the way it is. But a lot more people of different types and sorts are working, and we're starting to reflect the society we live in instead of just the kind of particular aesthetic appeal of a certain stripe, right? So anyway, I started doing movies in 2007. I made my first picture with Jim Cameron. It was my first job in front of a camera. I was super lucky to do it. I went down there not knowing how to do really, or not, I didn't know. I didn't have any faith that I knew how to act in front of a camera. And he was the person who probably made me understand that A, I did, and B, it was a technical, real endeavor. And it wasn't just about a kind of, I think I had it in my head just because of my experience and also my inexperience that you had to be a certain kind of person for the camera to love you and all that crap. And it just turned out all you had to do was really act well and in proportion and technically do it as an art, as a craft. And that sounds simple, but to me, that was a huge breakthrough because I just trusted him to run the camera and run the whole set, and I just acted, right? And I enjoyed that process a lot. I got a lot out of it. I then made a movie with Sam Raimi. I made a movie with Chris Nolan. Made a movie with Deepa Mehta a few years later. I've worked with some of the better filmmakers around. I generally those are the people whose work I seem to fit into and who my work appeals to. So I was really fortunate in that way, and I've just been really, in being an actor, I think is a lot of you're in an experience of your own, and you're gonna. I mean, everyone's like this, and I want to say it's just different, but every human being lives a life that's their own experience. But you are going to go through some of the more unusual experiences a person goes through, or put it another way, the same experiences everyone goes through, sometimes more acutely. And like the ups and downs of our lives are more like this, the sinusoidal variance is very high, the dynamic variance is very high. And we also have a lot of dead zone time, like we'll audition. And so anyway, that's my story. That's a bit, I illustrated a bit more than maybe you wanted me to, but I did tell you the general outlines how I got here.
That's fantastic. I think this is perfect. I think that we just keep the conversation rolling. That term you bring up with like having this dead zone time, and when you were first getting into acting, I have to imagine that dead zone time was probably pretty daunting. How did you actually get comfortable in your profession and in your lifestyle?
I mean, I think part of that is you make your choices and you take your bets and you pay them off. And I know people who went to drama school with me who just decided when they faced the industry, and I get this, they were like, it's not for me. Yeah. I did this. This was 2-3 years of my life. I was stoked. I thought it was for me. It is not for me. I don't like it. I'm going to do something totally different. And they did, and they're happy, and hats off. Like, you should know what you can endure. I've always said, I think in acting, the greatest talent you can have is, if it's a talent, is the ability to endure, being super good looking also helps, but having the talent to endure is the most important thing, because you will go through these. I mean, you can't help but take it personal, but you wish you didn't, which is just the times where you're just irrelevant. You don't count, especially early on. My God, like you saying you're an actor, you might as well say you've just shown up, on the most oversubscribed cruise ever, and there's no place to put you. Right? Like, it's like no one knows what to do with you. No one knows what you can do to help them. You have no idea anybody who was connected to it even gets you into auditions or get an agent. And there are so many layers of penetration because it is an oversubscribed profession. And also, to be fair, subscribed by various levels of commitment. There are people who are like, I'm 21, I want to be an actor for a while, and they're dumb when they're 23, and that's awesome. Great, And there's people who, like me, who are lifers. Once I decided at 18 and a half, I kind of knew this was it for me. Which doesn't mean I don't have huge, periods of doubt, or where you're like, I don't even know if I'm working enough to make this my calling, or there's all those times in life where you're like, I don't know what the difference is going to be. So it is daunting. You have to make your peace with it. You have to be also, it's a lot like life. Like, when you're not in this kind of profession, if you're a surgeon, like you said, or you do some other job, you work in an office or whatever, there's a peace you make with that, and you want that, and that's what you chose to cultivate, and your life has that rhythm. And acting, if you're choosing to do it, the acting is the highest joy there is. And for most actors, you just wait to get the job, and you have to kind of accept that there's a much larger process at work that you can't really influence much more than offering yourself. And to the degree that you have a gravitational attraction to the elements there, you might get a little bit extra, juice on you, or get a little extra ability to get in there. And every actor goes through, I think if you do it long enough, every actor goes through the periods where no one will arrest you. You start to get into some stuff. You work a lot. You get super hot. That goes down. No one will arrest you. It's like that is you make peace with a real psychological reality, which is like all that stuff is an illusion, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. It just is the process. So, that's how you have to kind of do it. It's not easy. I'm not suggesting it's even doable, but that's the vector you're on, right?
Yeah.
So try to treat it with some respect.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We don't have like a mathematical equation to saying this is what you've got to do. These are the steps we got to take, because you're discussing your own process, and I love it, because it does kind of mirror conversations we've had with other actors too, who have either sometimes by chance, sometimes it's networking. One of Lou Temple, who was on our show from The Walking Dead, mentioned that he followed a woman into a theater house that he intended to hit on, and he realized, I love what they're doing here. And that's how he entered the industry, you know. So that was one thing I did want to focus on for a little bit there, was if there was like maybe a specific instance, or maybe there was like a planning process that went into it, like what kind of took you off of the surgeon track into the acting realm?
Yeah, and you'd kind of mentioned that like you started doing, I think, like an acting. You started doing acting, and you just instantly knew. Was there like a part or a process or an exercise or something you did that just really sucked you
Yeah,
in?
there was an exercise, and it was also just the time of letting that exercise and when it happened ring in my life like a bell. And like we did this exercise. We wrote down something about your life, and then you said it out loud, and you read it to the class as if you were saying it, right? And you memorized it or whatever. And then I did it, and then the teacher was like, just turn around and do it with your back to the audience. And Todd Salovey was his name. He was a very good first acting teacher to have, and very accepting, very informative, had really good standards, but never caved from them. It also never made you feel shitty if you were, just a student taking a class who's not going to be an actor. Like he held the standard without making it rough on you. Anyway, I read it with my back to the audience, and I'd written about my parents and myself or something. It was something sort of about my upbringing. And I just heard my voice come out of me. And it was like, I told the truth about myself in a way that I had never heard. And, looking back now, I think there's a lot of pressure on that kid, who's trying to be really American and he wishes he was white and wasn't, conforming to what he wanted to be, which I think is true of everybody to some degree. And at home wasn't Indian enough and wasn't like a good boy and like was too rebellious and all that a little bit. And even though rebellion was pretty minor, but still any rebellion to a Hindu Brahmin family is pretty bad. And so I wasn't like fitting in, and I found this thing that like spoke like, well, you're real, like this is really happening. And then as I started to work on it, I started to attach and click into these parts of myself that were being activated to the things I admired in the world. And like I started to unveil myself. I mean, I think the truth of that also is that acting is a journey into understanding human life through understanding yourself. It is not through understanding, I don't think, it is not about understanding human life through understanding random fictional people. Those people only matter to the degree that you make them specifically true to what you know. And that doesn't mean just you yourself. I mean, you experience other people, you experience the world, you read, your imagination, all that stuff. But specificity begets universality. Like that's how we are all moved, and that's how we're all attached. We see it, we go, So that moment to me is like, it was the truth. And when you're young, there's not a lot of truth in your life. There's a lot of like fabulation, and we fib about ourselves, or we try on different personalities, and you think you're one thing. You're a skater, you're a goth, you're a grunge person, you are emo, you are blah blah jock. And the more you go into acting, everyone seems to creep out of those like other things, and they come into the island of misfit toys, and then everyone's in the theater.
Yeah. Well, this does kind of we pepper in some fan questions as we go, Dileep, and
sure,
and we've kind of straddled a little bit of this, but one of our fans in particular was asking if you had any advice for either aspiring artists and creators on relationships with their parents similar to the experiences that you've gone through.
Yeah, here's what I would say is the best advice. Test your own convictions, not with your parents, but with yourself. Like, test your convictions with how, to the degree you're willing to go through all this, right? And to the degree they're freaked out, they're concerned, humanize them. When you're younger, the problem that we all have, and even my words will be lost because it's hard to hear this unless you really hear what I'm saying. Your parents at the age you turn 18 or 19 have lost the ability to guide you through youth because you're no longer a youth. It's not that they have no ability to guide you. They'll help you guide you as an adult. But they're back now to their own choices they made into adulthood. Those are very specific to them. They're going to worry about you if they have 99.99% of the anxiety and love and care that most parents have for their kids. They're going to worry about you. Just put that on the shelf, okay? Like, they're going to worry about you. They're going to think you're throwing your life away. They'll also have their own worries, right? And so you are going to have to convince them that you are on something you believe in. you love them and you don't want to have friction with them about it because it just makes it worse. There's no reason
Mm-hmm.
to. Say, hey, we disagree about this, right? The flip side is, let's say your parents are super into you being an actor, right? The other thing is you should be able to say, I'm doing this for as long as I find it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And to the degree this is about your enthusiasm, I'm stoked, but this is not your life, it's mine. And that goes both ways. And that's an honest truth. You don't have to rub anyone's face in it. You don't have to be rough about it. It's your money. You're a kid, especially a young actor. That's your money, not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And if their love or their relationship or their intensity with you becomes enveloped in whose money it is, you need to quickly abuse them of that notion. It is your money. You earned it, because they may have to see you through so many years of you getting an education, finding a new profession. There's a lot of time. There's not time for them to spend your money for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that when you're younger, I have no many actors. That has to be yours to decide. And don't let people emotionalize your money. It's easier said than done, but that's true. And when you're older, it's your life, and don't let anyone emotionalize your decisions about what you should do. They're your mistakes to make also. If you end up sticking around as an actor for 25 years and you do one play, and that was the glory of your life, that was your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to live with that too. Like if you didn't pick up other skills, or if you did or didn't, whatever you did, right? That's on you.
Yeah.
There's no tragedy here. There's no life is not a narrative theater. That's why we have the theater.
Yeah.
Your life is yours. The consequences are borne by you, and no one has any sympathy for those who then cry later, because I think that's by the time you start 23, 24, you should know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great advice. I mean, I think about that too in the realm of how, when you look at our past generations and our parents, they were used to doing the same job, sometimes 25, 30, 40 years. And the process that you've kind of discussed mirrors a lot of how the job market is these days. We don't always know what we want to do right away, and it takes time. And so that's why you need to try out different things as you go. And so I really do appreciate your words on that, because it mirrors a lot of not just my own personal journey. Joe's is very similar like that, where you learn a little bit more as you go. No one should expect you to have it figured out, right out of the box.
No, and I think you've tried different things too as well, because you did some teaching yourself. I think for at least one summer, right? The Marlboro School in California.
Yeah, I mean, well, that was back when sort of acting for most of your life will not pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
And so I was a tutor and an educator for a long time, and I enjoyed it. It was not easy, but I did it. I taught a comedy class and an acting class there. I also taught math there that summer.
Oh.
I was a tutor for a long time. That's how I paid the bills. While I was, you do a play, you get paid well enough to pay all the rent and you have your expenses and do all that. And when you finish the play, you might have a month's rent saved up. That's it. So you got to have a day gig until you start working from camera. It used to be, before my generation, you could work in regional theater and make a living, with the expenses of rent and the non-acceleration of regional theater salaries and theater salaries, unless they're on Broadway, which even then can be tough because New York's expensive. I've done that and it's nice, but you don't save that much, it is now you have to work for a camera. And so you have to wait for that career to start. And that's a career that can start at any time. And it took a while for me, but everyone's different. Everyone's on their own. But yes, I've had many kinds of jobs in my life. I've also had really understanding, helpful parents. When I've been in a jam or a bind, they've helped me out. Generally, they of course want me to, sink or swim on my own. But there have been times when my dad has definitely saved my tail. I also just been lucky. Life's been lucky. I've had good fortune when I've needed it. And there's times when you're running out of money, you get a job, bam, you're doing 2 plays in a row and you're safe. Or I was on a game show and won some money there, and that helped pay for a year and a half of my not having to, if I kept my net low enough, and I tutored a little bit but not completely, I was able to keep it sort of good and still audition. And those things are the things you have to count on. If you put yourself in the way of you're in danger of doing good things, you'll lose some good things from time to time. So yeah, I've been very lucky.
Well, you are the first Jeopardy champion that we've had on this show. That little game show that we mentioned.
Your podcast doesn't specialize in Jeopardy champions. There's a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember seeing that story for the first time, and I went, "Holy crap! What are the odds?" And I really do appreciate, once again, just the journey you've taken, both on camera and off. I mean, there is a lot there to kind of go through. So that's why we wanted to celebrate that. Speaking of kind of going through some of your experiences, though, now we're not a sports show by any means. But Joe and I are both based in Wisconsin, and we do follow your Twitter as well. And I couldn't help but notice that you have a very turbulent relationship with the Denver Broncos. Asking if they're even a football team, how did that start?
Listen, I moved to Denver when I was like 8.5 from Saudi. We went to Denver to work on. My dad was working at an airport there. My mother was teaching, and we got there as Elway was traded from the Colts to the Broncos. And so my science teacher, because I was very into science, my science teacher was a huge Broncos fan. He would do these elaborate like chalk drawings to highlight the results of the game. I didn't even know how to watch football. I don't know how it worked, right? And so I got kind of into it because of him. And then as we left, I started becoming a Bronco fan because I was watching Elway play a lot, And so for a couple of years there, I started following them more closely, and they started doing really well, right? Yeah. And as long as that team was owned by Pat Bowlen, that team had a standard of excellence that was upheld through a culture that is the hardest thing to do in sports, right? Which is to have an internal culture and the correct rewards, incentives, and cudgels to create a winning atmosphere. Obviously, Kraft and Belichick have done it in New England to the highest degree I've seen any sports organization in the world. The Dodgers here do it really well now. But the Broncos, for as long as Bowlen owned them, they went to more Super Bowls than they had losing seasons, right? That's a crazy statistic, right? And since he went into his sad, he had Alzheimer's, and so his decline was sort of off stage, but we all knew he was kind of slowly losing his ability to govern the team. And Joe Ellis and Elway and these other people were running the team, and they basically ran it into the ground. And it's been a disaster. I mean, like, again, I get angry with Elway for a lot of things. I get angry with these people because it's not just that they're incompetent. I think they can try their best and still be bad, right? Yeah. And the product is not good. The team is terrible. That game against the Browns, I said, are they a professional football team? Like, yes or no? Because it does not appear to be professional level effort out there. Like, the coaching is terrible. Vic Fangio is clearly, I mean, if you're a first-time 63-year-old head coach, I'm sorry. There's a reason, unless you're the most overlooked guy and bam, you do it and you're like competitive and your team is great, then it's like, you know what? That guy did get the shaft. That guy should have been a coach at 45, right? No, this guy is a terrible head coach. His teams are so unprepared. His side of the ball, he's supposed to be a defensive genius. His system is taking over the NFL. He can't even run his own defense. Like, they get run over constantly on the run and the pass. We're at best mediocre and mostly horrible, right? In every phase of the game, that team is incompetent. And to the degree that football teams are kind of run around, getting a good franchise quarterback, a decent offensive line, especially the tackle on the blind side of the quarterback, whether he's left or right-handed. Usually the left tackle is right-handed. And having young enough players come through the system so that your system of getting contracts and getting younger players up and then kind of either letting them go when they get too expensive, or the good ones paying them and then, maybe trading them and like using assets to constantly accrete value. There's a kind of lack of that kind of intelligence in the building. And that the system is never built to like outsmart our rivals. There's a kind of like generic idea, and then it all goes to shit in the details. So I've had a really difficult time watching them lose, given how much we won. As maybe I'm spoiled. I'm not a Jets fan, right? But I can't accept that kind of thing in my life, right? Like, I can accept a bad season here or there. I can't accept like endemic idiocy like that. That seems like just you hate yourself, right? If you're a Jets fan, you like being a fan of a losing team. It's just pure and simple. And I always think like Bengals fans are gonna not know what to do now because Burrow and Chase are so good that it's like they're used to winning, kids, because you ain't gonna be losers for a while. And like all those players somehow pass through our hands, right? So I have a lot of problems with them, and I also am outraged. Like, I'll say another thing. Like, I made this on my Twitter. I'm very political, but I'm also open to people having their own politics. I think America suffers when like we claim someone just doesn't count, right? Like, for some reason, whatever reason, aesthetically, something you said, whatever, you don't count anymore, and you're
absolutism,
out, right? And all purity testing. Also, it's just an aggression without proof, an aggression of annihilation, right? Which I think is just, it's not fair at any point. And by the way, let's be honest, racial minorities, women, gays, marginalized people have been annihilated forever. So they are obviously the first people that should be allowed to speak and get right. And I'm a brown person. I get this, right? I'm a son of immigrants. I get a lot of that shit. But there is a difference between being accepting of everyone's politics and then what I think Elway did, which really made me upset, which was when Neil Gorsuch was being considered for the seat that had been held for Garland and not heard, which was a political maneuver of the highest, chicanerous, but not illegal, right? It was not. It was just chicanery, and it's terrible. And it's also a terrible precedent. I think it's bad for the country. It's horrible to do these kinds of things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Is a really important thing, right? And when Elway wrote to endorse Gorsuch on Denver Broncos stationery as the vice president of football operations, that took it over the line for me. And I sent him a letter, and he blocked me on Twitter. But I was very clear. I'm like, this is not right. Like, you hold a public trust by being in charge of a sports franchise that you were a legend of. And I accept that you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, whatever, dude. Like, you don't like taxes or whatever your problem is, cool. You like the meretricious nature of what you think sports is, awesome. But when you get into this kind of culture war as the official of, like, the team, I think you're putting your thumb on a scale in a weird way, right? And I thought it was kind of gross. And we're all Democrats and Republicans or independents. And we all go to work together. And the country is now suffering from this terrible excess of personal fervor, and inexpert self-assertion. And everything is identity politics. And everything is a kind of everyone's a victim, and which can't be true, right? And we suddenly have to have only us in the tent, and if anyone else succeeds, like it's better you don't succeed than the country succeed. Like, it's insane. Like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I understand the rage people feel because they're being stoked to feel it, but if you're on tilt all the time, you're going to feel that, right? And I myself have felt it. I myself have been part of it. I'm not different or separate. I'm not better than it, but I'm trying to get through it. Because I also believe, especially after recent deep dives into Civil War, the pre-Civil War period, and through Lincoln's presidency, just how terrible it can be, and how this seems like it's about absolutely nothing, right? It's like kind of engineered, which doesn't mean it's not real. It's just I'm saying, like, the differences aren't slavery, the differences are like kind of aesthetic and tribalistic, and it's become like sports, which is horrible. That's not what politics should
exactly.
Be. No, it should not be.
I completely agree with you that politics is almost like a sports conversation now, because it's less about debating ideas and more about arguing opinions. Like, I think that's really where we get into trouble as a society from that viewpoint. And I actually forgot about that Elway story that you just mentioned. I think it's a really bold move to use stationery, and your opinions do not reflect everyone who is under that umbrella. So, correct. I mean, that's unfortunate for that, but it is kind of funny that you're also the first person on this show to be blocked by John Elway on Twitter. Now we know we've got some firsts that we're doing today.
Listen, John, if you're listening to this, let's bury the hatchet. I'm happy to have a much more civil Twitter conversation with you if you'd like it that way. You're still a legend in my heart, and I cried and wept when you lost those Super Bowls and wept when you won, and I'll always have that sense of a deep fealty to your legend, if not the man you became. But listen, if he blocks me and that gives him the pleasure of blocking the people who would criticize him, I get that too. Like, I would probably do the same.
Well, if the country is really turning into like basically a sports franchise of politics, I'll be happy that it's not being run like the Miami Dolphins, because I'm definitely fine with. I've subscribed to losing football team. I signed on out of spite when I was young. I've been holding it ever since, and I'm too old to switch teams.
Well, let me put it this way. I'll also say this about sports versus politics, which is why maybe this is a good metaphor for the Dolphins, right? Is that the reason we have sports is that politics isn't sports, right? Like, when politics is sports, you end up in civil war, right? Like, the reason we have sports is so we can pour those stupid passions into things that don't fucking matter. It doesn't matter. Like, the Miami Dolphins are not even from Miami. They're from all over the country. You're rooting for laundry, as Seinfeld said. And he's right. You're literally rooting for a shirt and a logo, and like, great. And we do it because we know it's inane. It's stupid. But it's the thing you attach yourself to so that you don't attach politics to this shit. Like, this is the thing that screwed us up.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you expanding on that. I know that, once again, we're not a sports related show, but it's fun to kind of go down that route.
We can move on.
Well,
this is fun. I love that.
Hey, no, there was a reason. We love the art of the segue. That's kind of a podcast thing. But speaking of teams and ones that work, I mean, you immediately broke into the scene with with films that really worked well. And so that's where you've mentioned some of this too, where like they've been deeply rooted in sci-fi, and they're celebrated because of not just content but ideas and just the presentation of these overall. Now, one thing that I have always appreciated about you as an actor are some of the things that you mentioned that you kind of learn along the way. These are like the little pieces of characters that kind of come together. And what I've noticed about you in particular, whether it's Drag Me to Hell, whether it's Inception to a point, I mean, you've got a language, like you mentioned, physically, where when you're talking to people, you're leaning towards them. You know, when you're trying to open up to other characters, I mean, your body language shows that too, right? And so when I look at you in a film or a property, that's the first thing that I kind of hone in on. It's like, I'd have a beer with this guy. Whatever's going on in this movie, I want to hang out with this guy. So as part of your I guess your process and how you built that up over your career, was that something you focused on, kind of front loaded it, or did we refine this as we went?
I don't know who we is, because it's me, not you. But I'm just kidding.
Yes.
When a server goes, "Are we still working?" I'm like, first of all, you're working. I'm eating. And second of all, I don't consider this work, right? I'm just joshing with you. So I would say this, man. The bottom line truth of that is this: I think stage actors have a very quick education on what their relationship to the audience is. And it has to do with a kind of, how do I put this simply? It's a place, it's right for the character, right? And not everyone has this here. Mm-hmm. But it's a place where you sit your center of mind in relation to the aspect of being in public. And to the degree you do that openly without asking for anything, right? Mm-hmm. You are perceived as charismatic and likable, right? And to the degree you shield it but let it poke through, you're seen as fascinating and interesting. To the degree you don't know where that gear goes, you just don't have that as an operative weapon, right? Which is fine, because not everyone has everything, right? I can't Hulk on screen like Jason Momoa. It's never going to happen, right? I don't have that physical build. And so there's a certain place in me that, and I think it has something to do with like coming through it, both being a son of immigrants and coming to a culture that was very different and making that leap fully, mm-hmm. is that I have a certain way of being where my rhythm and my aspect take away protection, and I don't protect myself. But I also come across as being calmly present, like on an emotional, I can go up and down, but like, I'm not having you come in to my, and those characters, at least, and other characters is different, but like in those two characters, I'm not having you become intimate with me in a way that where you feel like this guy's unstable, right? And there are characters that are like that, where it's like, I'm going to be very still, I am completely raw, and you are terrified because you don't know what I'm going to do. Like that can happen. And that's how you use the same thing in a different way, right? Same tool. But the part of you where you're like, I want to be with that guy. Some of that is also, to be frank, but some decisions I made about the casts I was in, right? Like in Drag Me to Hell, like there's the femme fatale who's got the big lift and she's doing a ton of the work and mm-hmm. she's discovering the movie, the plot and the nature of the thing. I am the guy who's like guiding her to explore it, but also I wanted to have certain shades of things that made him much more human instead of just being like a plot device to help her discover it, right? So like some of the things I gave him were a kind of like, a deep interest in her vulnerability and her kind of aloneness, right? Mm-hmm. And how unsupportive he felt like her boyfriend was to her given her situation, right? Yeah. He was more about surfaces than he was about assisting her in the situation she was in because he wasn't credulous. Mm-hmm. But also that he also had this human side of him that was like, yeah, but also I don't want to get involved. Like I'll totally tell you, but I don't want to. This sounds terrifying. I don't want to be there when this shit happens, right? Like, and that also made it to me much more like real to me. Like, made his characters seem realer to me. And Sam seems to support me doing more of that. So I ended up having these like really open conversations with her while doing all this exposition. I also think it's one of these things in movies like that, when you play this kind of role in those films particularly, you have a lot of expository material to get through. And if you do it as like a kind of, even like a lecture, it's bad, right? One of the great examples of doing it great of all time, is in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indy does the whole, it's like a 10-12 minute scene. He describes the Ark of the Covenant and opens the Bible, and he goes through and looks at it, and like you have a really long, emotionally driven, clear context exposition for the whole movie, with two like government apparatchiks who are there going, and like he does that so beautifully, because he makes it a compellingly vulnerable and interesting to him, right? And so I've always really liked Harrison Ford. I think we're very different kind of actors in some ways, alike in others, and I really like his work. I mean, he's one of my he's up there with me for like Oldman and Lewis, who are my idols. De Niro, Pacino, Nicholson, Meryl Streep, Cate Blanchett. Those people are like heroes to me. Roshan Seth, Kingsley. But Harrison Ford has always had this unbelievable ability to make things that are dry on the page have a valence to him, whether it's like, I'm interested, or I'm irritated by it and I'll tell you about it. I don't like that this is true, but here it is, right? Or you expect me to want to care about this. I don't want to. There's a great moment in Blade Runner where she goes, have you ever had a false positive? And he goes, no. And it's like, he's protecting himself from this level of like, you think you can scrutinize me? I'm scrutinizing you, right? Like, and I have an attitude about, obviously, this vulnerable idea of like, did I ever retire someone on accident? But I didn't. And I'm not going to let you have at me. And that kind of attitudinizing, it's not, the word attitudinizing is a terrible word, but you have to have a certain relationship to those kinds of things. And to me, that thing about wanting to have a beer with that guy is like, all those characters have a sense of like engagement with the people around them to help them put together the pieces of what we have to do. Right. And there's like the whole sequence in Inception about like, I left the inner ear stuff so that you still feel the function of the fall. And he's particularly proud of it. Right. And I was like, the only way this fucking works is if he's stoked. Right. For me, right. It's like an achievement. I did it pharmacologically. And for me, that's about research and being really specific. So when that line comes out, I'm very specific in Dileep's mind what the fictional version of the pharmacochemistry is, so I could say it with some aplomb of being like, and let me tell you how good I am, as opposed to be like, I generically am proud of it, right? Like that's specificity. That's what good acting is, generally speaking. So, I don't care if you're playing on Feast of a Maid in a Chekhov play, or you're doing Inception or whatever. You just have to make it really, really specific so that it resonates with you.
Yeah, and what I related that to was kind of like this like Dan Aykroyd level of enthusiasm for like a Ghostbusters, because he knows the technology of everything that's built out in that universe, right? And so that's the same journey we kind of took with Yusuf when he's walking us through that. I completely agree. I was sitting there watching like you, like going, hey, I'm a nerd for everything you're about to hear, and I love it, and I'm proud of it. So let's talk about it.
And you should be. You should be. We're past the age of where that guy should be suddenly embarrassed because he's not a jock or something, right?
Yeah.
The other thing about the Aykroyd level of dorkiness is like, I always thought in that movie, it's like he is one of the principal creators of that property. So he has an enthusiasm that is central, whereas Murray's entire purpose is to surf it in a sardonic way, like, yeah, but I'd like to get laid, which is kind of actually, looking at that, it's a little like weird now. You're like, things change, times change, contexts change, but it's a movie, it still has its valence. I love the movie, but like he seems a little bit like, now you're like, is it really acceptable even then for a dude to be that interested in sleeping with this woman that he's like just not even taking her seriously?
And why does he have that much Thorazine? No one should have that much Thorazine.
Yeah,
correct. I agree.
Uncomfortable amount of Thorazine.
And Egon, when you see it again, you're like, wait, what?
Wait, no, what were you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
where's
why
your
is
plan?
this person alone with you, you weirdo? And then Egon is always like, he's like very technical, and I love that. That's what the secretary finds attractive about him. Yes. Like, he is withdrawn. Like he's like, yes, that is approximately how I feel, right? Like, and you're like that is hilarious, right? So it means that Aykroyd has to be that guy. He's kind of left with that bag, but it's also his bag. So it's totally perfect. That's what I was saying also about like fighting your way through a cast, right? In Inception, it's like Cobb is like absolutely the pure protagonist. He's also the person who suffered the most emotional damage, and we're in this kind of Hitchcockian mystery about like what has happened inside of him, right?
Yeah.
And then he has his like, you know, second, or Arthur, who's so like, you know, they're having this rivalry about like, are you being honest with me? Am I the threat? Are you the threat? You're leading me to my doom. Then you have Eames, who's sort of like, hey man, like this could be a Bond film as far as I'm concerned. Like I'm having a great time.
I love Eames,
and I'm the movie star. Like I'm the second movie star. Leo is the movie star, like always. Like,
Oh yeah.
I think he'd be a movie star. Like if you sat him down next to Bogart, they'd both be movie stars. Like he's immortally a movie star. But you know, Hardy's also walking around in that movie like, you know, I'm in any other movie, it'd be my movie, right? Like, and he's kind of just floating through it, you know. And so like there's an ease and a kind of physical grace he has that's it gives you this you admire and kind of like he cracks you up because he's just so like confidently smooth. And so I knew that like when I was watching some of that, I was like, you know, I've made the right decisions here because my guy is really his enthusiasms are for what he does, right? And his quandary is that he's being pushed beyond the boundaries of his comfort. And so that's the tension, that's his journey, right, in the movie, really. So that's how I saw it.
Yeah, and you've obviously had quite a few questions about Inception, so we don't want to be too aggressive here. But Joe does have a fan question from Inception that we all kind of tilted our heads at, and we're interested to hear what you think about this.
Okay.
All right, let's hear it. I probably heard it before.
All right, so fan question wants to know what happens in Yusuf's first dream if he has indigestion instead of too much champagne.
I've heard that too. I always said if Chris was true to the way he constructs these things, the actual image would have started to bubble through with gas, right? And you would see like the actual reality like floating through, like it was as if the whole thing was underwater and like gas was bubbling through it. Like that would be what it was, and then it would just suddenly drain. I don't know what that is. It's interesting, and also, you know, the notion of that being how it works is only suggested by Eames, and I deny it. So, you know, I'm not sure that is even what the mechanism is. It's just a joke that he makes, and I don't know about that.
So as that question came in, I actually took it over to my wife and I went, would you ask this question to Dileep? And she goes, I don't think I would. And I went, I go, but a fan asked it. I gotta. We're testing it for quality here, you know. But I
listen,
agree
I'm not
with you,
taking any of it. I'm not taking it myself so seriously that I'm like put off by it. If it's something that genuinely crosses the line with me, I'll just be like, I'm not going to answer that. But like, that's just conjecture. It's also funny, and I think it's also like it's funny that someone took the premise of the movie seriously enough to ask it, which is kind of goofy. But that's what look, it's a movie. We made a movie. It's fun. I'm glad people like it. You know.
Well, and that's a good. Once again, this art of the segue is a lot of podcasts love to do. One of the projects that I really enjoyed seeing you on was the Con Man show with Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
And I love how this is kind of like a parodied version of the show circuit that you go through, right? Going from whether it's Comic Cons, local, national, whatever it might be. So the question I had for you on this was your connection to that property. You know, how did that begin, and I guess how you got connected to it.
So the short answer is that Alan Tudyk is a friend of mine. So he picked up the phone, called me, and said, "We play this guy?" I was like, "Yes, of course."
Awesome.
But the longer answer is that so Alan went to drama school at Juilliard with a good friend of mine named Dave. Dave Conrad and him were, I think, a year apart there, and they became really close friends. And I met Alan through Dave, and then Alan and I had our own friendship. And then he was like, "Hey, man, do you want to come do this?" I was like, "Sure." And so I went down and shot it, and we had a really good time. And there's a lot of really good people in that show, and it's really absurd, and it has a kind of knockabout feel about like just the actors kind of doing funny shit that Alan's invented. And Alan is like one of the most talented people I've ever met. Like he just can do anything. He's so creative, and he's any acting thing, he's like a 10. It's like
Yeah.
he's just that good.
Easily. Mm-hmm.
And he's phenomenally interesting at everything he's doing, and he's one of those guys that's just like he's very special in our business, and I've always admired his absolute excellence. And it's it's weird. I'm sure it's not, but just like the best ever at anything, he makes it look so easy. You're like, how the fuck is that happening? But like he's really really gifted, and I was always stoked to do anything or even hang out with him. He's a good buddy, and so that's how that happened.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well, another more recent thing that came out on Amazon was Fanboy. So off of that, my question is, are you still big in Uruguay?
Huge in Uruguay.
Knew it.
No, that was made by Sam Raimi's at the time wife, Gillian, and she's a friend too. And so I did it because she's like, "Will you do this?" I've got this great actor playing the lead of this thing, and then I met Frank Kranz, who is a brilliant filmmaker, by the way. He has a movie coming out called Mass. I just advise you to watch it. It may be the best movie I've seen in a year or two. It's amazing. It is heart-wrenching. It's like Ingmar Bergman. There are times when it feels like the camera is not even present. It's like you're just in the room. So Frank Kranz is in that, and I always liked his acting because he's very funny, very talented, very smart dude. Went to Yale. But he's just also like a mensch, salt of the earth, good dude, really good guy, raised right. And yeah, I love the guy. But I got to tell you, this movie he's made is like on the highest level. It's got super high end performances in the Jason Isaac, Martha Plimpton,
incredible.
Reed Birney.
That's right. That's right.
It's so good, man. I can't speak highly enough of it. I think it's high art, like at the highest level, while still being completely palpably human. It's the last thing we make anymore. It's adults talking about serious things that have happened to them in very vulnerable, intense conversations where the balance of things shifts a lot, and your sympathies move around the room a lot, and your anger comes up, and it's just an incredible piece of art. And I can't speak highly enough of it. Anyway, he was the lead of Fanboy. We did that together. I got a lot of fun. Sam was around, and I love working with Sam Raimi. I think he's just the best person to work with.
Fantastic.
Every day you're on a movie with him is like being on it's like being on a home movie. It's like everyone is so nice. The standard is very high, but it feels like it's family. Like you'll get fired if you fuck up. Don't get me wrong. But like he has a very high artistic standard. But he's just also one of the most gentlemanly, gracious, giving, collaborative, brilliant people. Right? Just a treasure, national treasure, Sam Raimi.
Nice. Yeah. I always look fondly back to just his style because I was introduced to Evil Dead as probably younger than I probably should have been, but that's
most
okay.
People are.
Yeah, most people. and we also have to thank him. I mean, as much as there were superhero movies before him, I mean, Spider-Man really kind of helped vault some of our closeted nerddom and just make him into blockbusters. And so,
well, he was the right person to do it, right? He's a person who's firmly kind of a nerd himself. He's a film nerd, but he has a lot of deep understanding of that kind of stuff. And he also has just a really populist kind of streak in him that's like, yeah, but why do we care? Like, he's a storyteller. And I think that his ability to do the things he does is so easy for him at this point. Like his style and he's a genius, right? Like he can do that stuff like that. The stuff he cares about is like, why does this beat matter? Right. And even as the writer, sometimes is like, let's figure this out. I don't know. What do you think? Right. And like you build it together so that it gets better. And that's why his movies are so good, I think. And, I hats off to him and Toby and Kirsten and also the producer, what's her name? Who died recently. She was Laura Ziskin. She was amazing in shepherding that project together with Sam and doing the work that needed to be done. And those first two, especially Spider-Man 2, man, that movie is immortally one of my favorite superhero movies ever made. I just think that's such a fine picture, and it's such an emotional ending. I just admire the shit out of Sam for that.
One of the things I always like to do is kind of map out. We've talked about journeys now a couple times, right? In looking at your journey throughout your career, I like to see all the variants and what types of subjects we're going after here. Starting off with Sam in the horror realm, moving into some of this cerebral content, right? But then we move into things like Z Nation and Mr. Robot that are completely, different fundamentally. So I wanted to get your take on these different types of properties that you've been involved with from a genre standpoint, and if there's, I guess, any favorite aspects of horror versus thrillers, that you've really appreciated in your career.
Well, I think that, one of the aspects of horror and sci-fi and all these things is they require you to treat the supernatural as if it's natural, right? And casualize the extraordinary and make extraordinary the casual, right? Basic opposites. And I think that Z Nation is one of those experiences. I really love the people there. It was kind of fun. We had a good time. It was a lot of work. I remember just really leaning into the nature of the world. So I watched a couple of episodes, and whenever you're a guest on a show, I think you should always do your best to reinforce the basic nature of the world while shading something in that's new. That's why your episode exists,
Yeah.
And I really got a good chance to do that there. There were some really fun days on that set. There were long days, and I think that kind of thing is just such a joy when you're around actors that are having fun, and you get to lean into the kind of campiness of that thing, and it's excellently done. The work is really excellent, a very high level of achievement, but its aesthetic is a little goofy, and I think that there's a lot more of that can be done in this world. Everything is really grim now, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be grim things. Like The Dark Knight is The Dark Knight for a reason.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And the new Batman trailer looks awesome, and I'm so convinced that's going to be a good movie. But the goofiness of things is also really important, and there was a lot of that in Drag Me to Hell too. It's just a kind of Three Stooges-ishness to things where life itself is that. There's conundrum stupidities and everything. And you're how did we end up here, right? And that constantly happens in real life, and it happens in the movies. And I think that kind of thing was really present in terms of the storytelling of Z Nation. And the kind of the pot that kills you kind of thing is hilarious. And I had a lot of fun on that set. Mr. Robot was sort of different. I think Sam wanted me to work on that show, and I think he liked my work, and I was so flattered because that show is so awesome and so interesting. And Raimi's a real talent, and he's a very specific, interesting actor. There's a kind of concentrated, intense flavor he is that's like nothing else, right? It's like if you went to a bar at Death and Company and they're like, oh yeah, there is this tincture, but it's exactly that. And he is that, and he's really, really great. And I enjoyed working with him. I enjoyed working on the show. It was pretty quick. Just shot a couple days and done. But I enjoyed it immensely, and those are really good people, and they work hard. And they're also, what was really cool about that is that was a giant narrative that Sam had in his head that was ongoing every week, every episode, many years. He was telling a story that was like a novel, right? And each section was like a new section. He was putting it in, and he was guiding that thing with Raimi and everyone else, but he was guiding it on rails towards some deeper manifestation about the culture. And I think that there's something really deeply admirable about an artist taking something like that on. I admire it immensely.
Very cool. Well,
very.
We realize this section of our conversation, we can't go too far into spoiler territory, but it's the idea of getting to return to a property that's as loved as Avatar, because I mean it just blew the doors off of cinema when it came out, and for some folks this was the first time they got to see on screen too, and it was just a really fun universe to play in. And so since there's we can't obviously ask you about what your involvement is in the new films, of course, but your thoughts on getting to return to such a beloved property and your place in it.
I think just going back to that set is an honor, and it's a like you said, when we did it the first time, I don't think we knew what we were doing was revolutionary, because it was every day like that, and it felt like that. Some of it was like prototypes, and the cameras were all like brand new, and the software was brand new, and it all felt kind of super experimental, especially for someone who had made a lot of experimental films, but the whole film felt experimental, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was learning, I had a lot on my plate to just learn how to act and do the movie. And so
Yeah.
I wasn't really totally comprehending. I mean, I was, but also you can't because you just don't know what it's going to be. Because we go see some bits of it here and there, and the pod runs and see the 3D effects, and to make sure you watch Jim make sure that it was what he wanted, and you can kind of see what he was going for.
Mhm.
But you know, I had no idea what it would be like, what it would do. And so, like, once we return to the set, it's like, you know, they've been going, and you go in and out, and like, there's a lot of time, and they're working all the time. It's like a gigantic endeavor,
Mhm.
and you know, Jim is just the most committed dude, and I've never seen anyone work that hard at anything. Like, honestly, he's a pretty damn good manager of like a lot of people, and they're all doing his vision. You know, and that's been
Mhm.
true from the beginning, I think, of his filmmaking career, and that's very true in these properties. And you know, it's a personal honor to be back and to work with him, and it felt the same, and yet it's still even more revolutionary, and it's still even more like mind blowing in some ways of what we can do, and like everything is kind of serving a really cool story, and that's like all I can really say. I mean, I can't get further than just saying I can't wait for people to see it.
Yeah.
Give him the
Yeah.
time. Give him the time to
Mhm.
finish these two films, and give him the time to like do the post on them, because his perfectionism is only to your benefit, and his
Yeah.
understanding and governance of what he's doing is only going to serve you having a much better experience than you've ever had before. And again, I even knowing what I know from what everyone else knows about the first one, plus having done some of the stuff in these, um, I still don't totally know what it's going to do. Like, it's
Yeah.
once they get involved, you're talking about thousands of the highest level artists and technical people
Yeah.
working in concert to a single vision. It just goes beyond your ken. Like, you can be as smart as and predictive as you want. And when you sit down and you put the things on, you look at it, you're like, I could not possibly, right, have known what it is. And I always have the humility to know with Jim Cameron, you
Mhm.
should preserve a degree of your inexperience as humility to know, like, you probably don't entirely know what you're going to see.
Yeah, and like James Cameron, you know, he has made my favorite 80 Miles of Bad Road, that is Aliens. So the man's dedication to everything he does is seen in everything that he does. Like, I love this guy's work. And we've spent a good chunk of the last portion of the podcast here looking at your career with Sam Raimi, with James Cameron, with Christopher Nolan. So it brings us to our last of our fan questions. And what did this process do for you as an actor? Not only working with the diverse subject matter of the films you've been in, but also working with these very large names in directing.
That's an interesting question. I guess, you know, it humbles you, and it also does away with a lot of your notional thinking about things. Like, there's not a lot of time when you're working with people like that to be like in awe of them. You know, there's not a lot of time to
Yeah.
like get bullshit between you. Like, you have to start communicating as artists and people. And like, I am a forward leaning, interested artist. I'm interested in being present and collaborating and doing my job at the highest level I can, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm not interested in being interesting. I'm interested in serving the artist's vision who's writing or directing it, you
Yeah.
know? And with those people, I think what I learned is the more you offer in selfless collaboration, the more reward there is on a artistic level for you as part of the group.
Yeah.
My journey feels like it's a lesson in learning the total dynamic variance of your career. You will
Yeah.
work on the highest stuff there is in the world, and don't get too high on that, because then you'll go through the desert of not working for a long time. And there's very little you have control over that. You know, the same work you offer is often rejected as the times it is accepted and wanted. And you can't take it too seriously. It's like, you know, dating or something. Like, you ask some girl out, she doesn't want to go out with you. You ask another girl, she does want to go out with you. That doesn't make a difference. Really, those people aren't bad or good, right? You just go on a date with one, you don't with the other, and that's just totally fine. Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, it is obviously personal when you put yourself out there in both circumstances, because you're out there and your work
Yeah.
is out there. But you know, with someone like, you know, especially people like Chris, Sam, and Jim, maybe Jim more than anyone else, it's you got to show up with everything you got And like
Mm-hmm.
they all want that. But with Jim, it's like you're into this gigantic process. And like you have to come full so that he can take what you offer on the days you're there to do it and put it right into the movie and then, you know, maximize it. And then he's on to the next thing. And
Mm-hmm.
you're a big part of a very big part, you know, or a small part of a very big part sometimes. And like, you know, I think all these things teach you a lot about your internal emotionality about yourself versus your character, your job are very different things. And the more you can leave your own subjective mishigas at home, and the more you can do your thing with your highest level of expertise, love, and selfless offering, which means taking your ego out of it a lot of times without wanting something back, you know, you can have some tremendous rewards in life. And you know, you reach an age like I've reached, I'm 48 years old, and you're pretty clear, like, you're not going to live forever. And so you want the times you spent with other people, and I don't care how famous they are or not, bigger their name is, but you want the time you spent with other people doing the things you care about to matter to everyone who was there, and that you tried your best to try to uncover something that was truthful. Now, not every truth you uncover is going to be like, going to be a contender, right? Sometimes you're going to uncover things that are like, oh my God, what a beautiful brain, right? You're going to find these things that are human. And I think you're going to have to accept that your truth is crucial to your life and your art, but it may never look like what you, on your subjective Michigan side, want or need. You just have to be present for the part that you were allowed to play, and that you were also crucial to play, and to embrace the collaboration and the belonging. And because I think every artist is an artist out of some divorce from belonging to something they in their childhood or trauma of their youth. And in our art making, we re-collaborate with the past and the present in a deeply hopeful, wishful faith of the greatest order endeavor to bridge to the future, right? And that's like the thing you have to find your communion in, and finally you do belong. It just, you can't insist that it's on the terms that you fantasize about.
Yeah, and you obviously put that eloquently better than I think I ever could. But I always love to hear about, because we don't want these interviews to be viewed like a eulogy or something, right? That's not what these are meant to be.
Jesus Christ, man! What do you guys have in mind?
Well, no. Here's the reason why I say that.
Just kills me.
I
hate this podcast.
I wouldn't have gone with eulogy. Personally.
No. I said I don't want this to be a eulogy, because when we were talking with
dude, I don't want to be around for my eulogy. That sounds like a terrifying idea.
No. I set the plate for this because in previous conversations, someone went, "Man, I feel like I have a lot more in the tank," and I go, "Yeah, you do. We're not saying you don't." You know, and it was.
I see what you're saying. Like it's a judgment of like to finish someone's career.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I
that's,
don't think anyone's feeling.
That's why we always like to ask about, you know, not just what you have going on tomorrow, but you know, other aspirations that you have too that maybe we haven't tapped into yet, and exploring that a little bit here.
You know, like I think every single actor has a Hamlet in him. I'm slowly reaching the end of the tenure. I can really play it. I probably have another couple of years because I still look pretty young, but I want to play Hamlet. I want to direct my own pictures, and I want to write and direct my own pictures. And there's a horror movie I'm writing right now that I'm at least going to star in. I'm probably not going to get directed because that's money, and they don't trust you to do that right out of the gate. But it's a genre franchise thing that I think could have some legs, and it has some stuff that's specific to my background and which I really like. And I'm exploring some stuff about, you know, white supremacy and about Indian, you know, casteism, and also the nature of experiencing, you know, the horror of the idea of Nazism using Indian symbols and Indian cultural artifacts as the symbols of their genocide, right? Like that's interesting to me. And there's a lot of, you know, Hindu mythology, which is also very interesting to me. So I'm exploring some of that in the project I'm working on. The more you audition, the more you see what there is, what there isn't. The thing I would like to do, which really we don't have in this country, but I would love to, is to do one of those like British detective shows that's like popular but genre-ish, you know, and noir-y.
like a
True
Luther,
Detective, maybe,
or yeah,
or yeah, Luther, or like True Detective is like the one example we have that's here. But they have a lot more shows like that, like like Vera and like
yeah.
especially Endeavor is like one of my favorite shows ever. And the writer Russ Lewis is an awesome dude. If I could get him to write a show for me in America, I would be totally stoked. It's awesome. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'd love to do. But anyway, yeah, like I do want to direct and write starting soon, and that's the kind of thing like where I love working with other actors, and I'm a good acting teacher and I'm a good acting problem solver. I have the brains for it and the feel for it, and I like helping younger actors figure stuff out when I'm working with them or when we're all collaborating in plays and stuff. I've directed a bunch of that stuff in my life. I was appointed as actually a professor, but I turned it down to teach acting at the MFA program at UC Irvine, and like I do enjoy that aspect of things, and I don't think I want to do a class or something, but I think I would like to direct and be like, all right, let's just figure this out. That's maybe something I want to look forward to. But more of the same, more and more acting, more doing more, being on stage again. I miss the stage because of the pandemic has shut it down, and it's coming back now, but it's still difficult.
Yeah.
But I think I'd like to maybe do series television for a couple of years. I think that would be kind of fun if the part is right and I'm the right fit for them, because that's a big time collaboration. That's a big thing. Like you're stepping into a couple of years of work, and they're going to spend a lot of money on it, and like you just have to be really right and for each other. So maybe that'll happen. We'll see. I'm kind of open to a lot of things at this point, but I'm also trying not to wish too specifically. Otherwise, your expectations end up being the engine of your disappointment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess in closing, is there anything that you would like our listeners, the dissection crew as we call them, is there anything that you would like to offer to them in parting?
I would say thank God for the people who go to the theater and rent the stuff at home or whatever, but especially people who go to the theater and sit in the dark with strangers and watch things on big screens. We're really grateful. I think we can forget how important they are to the equation. So all my gratitude. I would say we're in a particular era of intellectual property and of making films, which is very narrow, I think. And it feels like the triumph of the nerds, which I'm stoked for. I'm a nerd, but I'm not a kid anymore. I'm an adult and I've had grown-up experiences. And I hope that their appetites and their interests will be broad enough that we can start to make other kinds of art, like our generation's Chinatown, our generation's The Godfather, our generation's Kramer versus Kramer, our generation's grown-up movies, right? Like where they're about concepts that are sometimes a little more down to earth, but just as momentous, and that we don't have to only explore our parental child relationships through being Clark Kent and Jonathan Kent, and that we don't have to just explore that Bruce Wayne was Thomas Wayne to love him still, even though he's dead. Like we can have other relationships, like where we see what it's like to be in a complex adult child parent relationship or sibling relationships that involve some things that are closer to us and aren't intermediated by genre, right? Which is where we seem to be the only place of doing it now. Is that like it's great for siblings because they're both superheroes or something, and you're like, how about they're not? How about they're just two people who grew up on the same block, and they're brothers? Or like, there's that fascinating idea. I think my friend had a fascinating idea about a man who walks out on his family, but he only moves 2 blocks away, and then he like watches them, And I was like, see, that is an amazing idea to play. Like that would be spectacularly interesting to watch the humanity of that discovery, right? And what the happenstance, like imagine running into your kid. What the fuck like that would be so great. And like these are the kinds of things that like I'm super interested in. So thank you to your audience. Thank you for coming. Don't forget, we made other stuff. We may still do it.
Yes.
And it's all welcome, right? Like we all inclusivity, right? Like one of the things about inclusivity that because I'm a big proponent of that, and I'm glad to be included. But I think one of the most important things to remember in that is that you include people you don't know and people you don't necessarily agree with, and you can disagree with them, and people who have terrible opinions. Have terrible opinions, but you want to include them because if you choose to exclude people, you're harming your own circle and you're harming them irreparably and then you're also irreparably harming the relationship between that individual and the group. And then you get 2 groups, 3 groups, 10 groups, N groups, and then we're not a community anymore, And so thank them for being a community. Thanks for doing their thing. Again, we couldn't make what we make without you. So I am deeply grateful from all of us who do it. We don't express it enough. That's our bad, but thank you.
Well, we are deeply grateful and very thankful that you were able to come on today. So from this side of the screen, Dileep, thank you so much for coming on. We have had an absolute great time, and it was our pleasure to have you today.
Awesome, guys. Take care, and best of luck.
Joe, based on some of the origin stories we've had a chance to explore on this program, I have to say Dileep's is easily one of the most, I don't want to say unorthodox, it's not the right word, but it's definitely not the story I was expecting.
No, it wasn't. And I'm actually kind of sad that there are no giant robots involved, so I can't say robot after you use program to start this whole thing out. But no, what an incredible story. Everything from how much he moved around when he was younger to how he really develops a character before putting them on screen. And just, I think his willingness and kind of resolution to change the accessibility of figures in Hollywood with people like us just doing podcasts in our basement, and how he wants to have stronger connections between the industry and the people who consume these films and these movies. So I think that is one of the coolest things that he's doing out there right now.
Yeah, I will say it was nice to actually just kind of sit back and take in the bevy of things that Dileep mentions. We really did cover quite a bit during this conversation, and not just talking about specific roles in a movie or just the standard fan questions you always hear, right? But yes, kudos to Dileep for what he has done here to normalize and to kind of remove the whole pedestal idea that he mentioned, right? And he's just a fun guy to sit down with, and we really can't wait to see his upcoming appearances here in Avatar. I know that I'm at least a big fan. I'm not sure about you, Joe, but
absolutely love it. And I'm really hoping that somehow, some way, he smooths things over with John Elway and they can get this team back on track.
Yes. Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. And we do have a bit of an announcement to make as we wind down on season 1, this extremely long road that we've been on. But we are ending this season with our creator spotlight. We're sitting down with some of our favorite artists, writers, and designers as we explore animation, comics, and video game design. We'll be foregoing the normal side stitch format that we've been doing since the beginning of this season. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to have 1 episode a week. We'll be featuring a very specific creator. So instead of doing the side stitch, we'll be sharing some more information about their projects and where you can find their work. And we really look forward to sharing what's coming up next.
Yeah, and we are extremely thankful to all of our guests who've been joined by these incredibly wonderful people. And we are also really looking forward to being able to share their journeys, their talents, and everything that is them with all of you. So until next time, keep on dissecting.